where conversation meets music. This is Take Two.
Hey everyone, you're listening to Take Two with Tone Blakesley. Tonight, I'm really excited to be joined by a singer-songwriter who founded and sung for many years with the progressive rock band Yes, and one of my all-time favourite bands, it's Jon Anderson. And if you're new, do be sure to subscribe to our Mixcloud page and be the first to know of new programmes, and follow us on Facebook to hear about forthcoming shows. And we commence the show tonight with a Yes classic, Owner of a Lonely Heart. That was Yes with Owner of a Lonely Heart, which saw guitarist Trevor Rabin join the band and our guest Jon Anderson's return. For over 50 years, Jon has been the lead singer of one of prog rock's most quintessential groups, Yes, and wrote some of the band's most groundbreaking albums, including Fragile and Close to the Edge. And recently, Jon has been working on solo material for his New Chapters album series, opening with 1,000 Hands, Chapter 1. So, without further ado, I'd like to welcome the one and only Jon Anderson to Take Two.
Ta-da! The one and only.
It's so good to have you on the show. I mean, I've got to congratulate you on your new album, 1,000 Hands, Chapter 1. It's an album full of incredible dynamic, a diversity of sound and meditative rhythms.
Yes, sirree.
And I believe that the project began nearly 30 years ago with Yes band members Alan White and the late Chris Squire.
Yeah, actually, I was working with an old friend of mine called Brian Chatton, who's from Bolton, and he joined the Warriors in the 60s, keyboard player.
Oh, yeah.
He was great, and he stayed with the band until I left the band in 1967. They wouldn't get out of bed and rehearse. I like Brian very much, but Ian, the drummer, and David, the bass player, and Rodney, with the guitar player, they were staying in bed till 11 o'clock in the morning. And I was up at 9 o'clock saying, let's rehearse. We've got to become great, you know. So eventually I left. And then we met each other in London about 6 months later, and we became friends forever. So me and Brian, he was in LA, so I called him up and I said, why don't you write some music? I'm going up to Big Bear in the mountains, in a ski resort area. I'm renting an A-frame and I'm taking my studio up there. So why don't you write some music for me and I'll sing for you, Brian? And he said, okay, love. And we started writing these songs, and they were very good. You know, they were very happening sort of songs, and I felt very comfortable doing longer pieces like Activate Me and Come Up, which eventually we used. And we had about maybe 8 songs, and we had some really interesting musicians to perform on music at that time. And I'd actually promised to go on tour with this Japanese composer called Kitaro. What happened was Brian went to work with another producer in Chicago with the tapes. And, you know, they tried to make him into pop music. And after I came back from the Kitaro tour, I heard them. I said, sorry, I don't like this kind of thing. We were going along a certain way. I wanted to keep that up. So let's do it another time. This is like 1991. So, of course, time took over. I went on tour with Yes. Brian was doing a lot of other things and just never got it finished. And I had the tapes in my garage for 28 years. I kept looking at them. I had a cassette of the songs and I played it maybe a couple of times and I thought, they're good songs, you know, nothing wrong with them, but they need producing better, you know. And I had this idea of calling the album Us Lot, meaning a lot of us. And I was going to invite the Beach Boys to sing on it because I met a couple of them at this event in LA. And I like Wayne Shorter, who was the great musician from Weather Report, and Billy Cobham, because I was a big fan of Mahavishnu Orchestra. I don't know if you know Mahavishnu Orchestra, but they were very, very big in the 70s. And we actually did a show together. Their first show, we actually saw them perform. They started the show, then we came on, and then the Kinks were the headliners. It was up at a big university in Washington. And we saw this band, Mahavishnu Orchestra, rehearsing. And I looked at Chris and said, we got to rehearse. We got to rehearse, man, because these guys are seriously good. But, you know, the years went by. And when Brian went to do some recording of the songs with the same producer, Michael Franklin, got in touch with me 2 years ago and said, have you still got the tapes? And I said, which tapes? And he said, you know, the tapes from Uslot. And I said, oh yeah, they're in the garage collecting dust. He said, well, send them to me and I'll put them in the oven. He lives in Orlando. So you get the tapes, these are big tapes, you put them in the oven and you bake them because they can only play on once. It's just tape, it'll just fall apart, having sat around for years, you know, in a garage. So he played them once, put them straight to the computer, and he sent me a tape of the mixes. And I went, oh my gosh, it's so good. You know, this is really good. And I said, Michael, who's playing flute on Activate Me? He said, I got Jon Anderson to play on it. I said, what? Yeah, I got Jon Anderson to play on the record. I said, oh, that's great. Because I'd mentioned to him, all I want to do is add musicians along the way. And he knew Chick Corea. He had Billy Cobham's phone number. He knew Tower of Power, a great brass section that play on Makes Me Happy. He had these singers that I love very much. They're called Zat Mama. They're from Belgium. And they're very North African energy about them. And various other guitar players, Larry Carial, all these people. He just kept bringing them in every week for that first 3 months. And I was sort of mesmerized. I said, look, I just went on tour with Jean-Luc Ponty 3 years ago. We can get Jean-Luc to play on Come Up. And it fit like a glove. And what happens, it seems, the musical was already pretty good. As soon as you bring in a real professional, really talented guy, the track sort of goes up in energy. And so by the time we finished the album, which was the Christmas of 2018, we just couldn't get anybody interested in a 75-year-old hippie for some reason. Record companies were a bit, well, you know, he doesn't really sell as a solo artist, you know. You live with that. I went on tour with some guys from Orlando, some piece band. I had a violin player, a girl from Taiwan. I had a keyboard player from Thailand. I had a percussionist from Trinidad. You know, numerous people from around the world. And we all sang together and we loved working together with a show. And we started the show with Owner of the Lonely Heart, then Yours No Disgrace, and then Starship Trooper at the end, and I've Seen All Good People. So we threw in all the Yes classics as well as the new album. And it worked like that. You know, it really worked so well. And then the virus came. Ta-da! But it's not all about, you know, making as much money as you can. Just get the record out to as many people as you can.
Indeed.
There you go.
There's so much going on with this record. It's fantastic. It's got many, many stunning contributions from the thousands of hands of musicians that came to play on it. I mean,
hello, everybody. I did my makeup today for the first time in like a while. Feels good. A girl on TikTok said to try wearing...
it's got a real unity, this record. I love it.
Yeah, well, I think two things happened. I think we got a lot of people that I know. You know, in this business, you don't meet very many people unless you're a celebrity. Never been a celebrity or a rock star. So I never went out that much. I'm a very homebody. I have a beautiful wife. And we're happy together. So when you meet some people around the business now and again, you connect like that, you know, and they remember you, shall we say, you know. So there's that feeling that everybody wanted to play on the record. Like when I got Alan and Chris to play on a couple of tracks, they were in LA doing an album with some other people. And they just wandered in for one afternoon and boom, boom. These guys are brilliant. And that's the way the album took on a life of its own. And the fact that it took 30 years to finish really is interesting, that it's released around now. And the reviews are fantastic. You just hope that people get the chance to hear it and listen to it.
It's like a follow-up to the first album that you ever did, you know, Elias, a Sunhillow. It's got all that world music influence in it, where you just hear all this ranging sounds from around the world. But things have changed quite a lot since then. Now you can link up to another studio from your home and you can ask the people wherever they are in the world to record at the very moment. Whereas on the Highest of Sunhillow, you were recording all the tracks by yourself.
Everything. It was just me and a really good friend, an engineer. And we spent 3 months every day adding this. And I was doing some work just before. This is one of the instruments I was using.
Oh, wow.
I was coming out with a... So I'm going to do that today. I'm going to do a little bit of folk music for the Zamran. Zamran is the son of Elias, and I've been promising my son to do the son of Elias now for 15 years. So I've collected a lot of music, and it's just piled up, and it's getting bigger and noisier. And I was talking to him yesterday because Chelsea beat United. He's a Chelsea fan, and I'm United. So I had to talk to him, and I said, yeah, I'm doing this music and I can hear the kitchen sink in there. Because the old story was when you're mixing an album, the joke was you got to put everything in, including the kitchen sink, okay? Make sure it's all big and, you know. So I'm doing Zamran now. I think I'll finish it by Christmas, maybe, fingers crossed.
Well, I can't wait to hear it. That is some advice that I will take up myself. Recording the kitchen is going to feature on my new record at some point, hopefully. And do be sure to stay with us as Jon tells me about the creative process behind his songs and the Yes epic Close to the Edge. That was our guest Jon Anderson with Now and Again, and before that, Meeting, Garden of Gedda, Sound Out the Galleon, from Elias of Sunhillow, his debut album. And Jon's new album, A Thousand Hands, is full of intriguing lyrical concepts that reflect the changing world which we live in. And Jon now shares with me how he came to write the songs of A Thousand Hands.
I think most of them started off in the Big Bear, up in the mountains, and to drive out of LA, you'd see in the gardens, the Proposition 34 say no, Proposition 63 say yes. You know, everybody's voting for something, you know. And that's why I picked up on Proposition 35, 42, everything begins and ends with you. You know, you start using the proposition word that became Activate Me. And there's some lyrics in there that remind me of the 60s. The song Makes Me Happy. And coming out of the solo, I sing about, who was it said, let's make love, not war. You see, anything's possible. And that was John Lennon, you know, and Yoko. You sing stuff and you go, oh yeah, I was thinking that. So there it is. A lot of the music that I've written over the years is about waking up and dreaming more, you know, wake up and dream. And Close to the Edge, I don't know if you know this music, but Close to the Edge of Realization was all about reading and learning from Hermann Hesse. The books of Hermann Hesse was Journey to the East, Siddhartha, all about how we're interconnected. In all religions are all interconnected, and we shouldn't say that Christianity is cool and you guys are going to hell. You can't say that. It's impossible, you know. And the sooner the religions realize they're all actually connected. I actually have a book, and it reads what Jesus said, what Muhammad said, what Buddha said, and what Krishna said. And they're actually saying the same thing, but in different words. And it's a whole book of that. I think everybody should have this at school when they're 8 years old, you know, instead of the dogma of sin and persecution, you're going to hell. Ta-da!
I mean, these are really big themes, and I grew up listening to Yes music. I am a huge fan of Yes's musical style, and Close to the Edge. I mean, I interviewed Bill Bruford, and he was telling me that Close to the Edge was his favourite record that he recorded with Yes.
It was magic. And the funny thing was, 2 weeks after we finished it, he called me up and said, Jon, I'm leaving the band. My head went, what? We've just created a modern masterpiece of music here, and you're leaving the band? And all I could think was, what's wrong with us? That's all I could think. But then I found out him and Chris were sort of like a little bit too like that. And I remember seeing King Crimson with Chris, and King Crimson's first show was at the Speakeasy in London. And they were performing their first album in the Court of the Crimson King. And there was a lot of people in the club, you know. And me and Chris are standing there having a drink and, you know, watching this band set up. And then they started playing. And I couldn't breathe. I went, oh my God, Chris, we've got to practice more. It's been the theme of me and Chris, I think. We got to practice more because these are great, which they were, King Crimson. And then Bill Bruford said, I'm going to join King Crimson. But I loved him, loved him very much. It was great to see him at the Hall of Fame because I haven't seen him for some 20, 30 years, and it was great to see him.
Yes, because the band got inducted about 3 years ago into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and Rick gave one of his great speeches.
Brilliant. He really made it work because everything was a bit, people would come on and talk, and then he comes on and starts telling dirty jokes. Very Rick. You see, can't beat that.
Oh, yeah. There's so many talented musicians that have been in Yes, and Close to the Edge is one of their pinnacle albums. And, I'm really interested in the concept and, what went into making it. And, I done some reading, and I believe that you studied Sibelius's Seventh Symphony, and you were reading Lord of the Rings.
Yes. Well, I realized after the first time I listened to Sibelius's Seventh Symphony, I was on tour and I had a boombox that was in my suitcase, so I could play symphonic music. But I was listening to the Seventh, and it started and then it ended. And usually symphonic music was in 3 parts, but this was like 27 minutes long, and it went like that. It just took no time at all. So I started talking to Steve about putting together a structure, because I'd learned a lot about structure in the past couple of years. I was working with, I was always the guy that came up with not so much ideas. I'd listen to everybody playing and I'd suggest, what are you playing now? Could you do that? Rick, can you double that, please? Good. Now, can you change key? I'll sing this part. And, and I never told Bill what to play, actually, because I did it once. He got very upset. We were doing a song and I said, could you play like Ringo Starr, please? I think it was Time and a Word. Sorry, Bill. Anyway, so I would be in the middle talking to everybody and then let them get on with rehearsing that section. And I'd be thinking about the next section because I'd already worked it out with Steve. So when they finished, I said, okay, here's the next section. If you think about Close to the Edge, I came up with this idea, why don't we start with a solo? And they said, okay. Now Steve's solo, and Rick, you'll do a solo in the middle of the piece somewhere, you don't know where. So we're going to start, just go like hurtling in as though you're halfway through a solo, like that. And then you're going to stop somewhere, okay? You can't just keep going. And they said, how do we stop? And I said, well, I have a cassette of Steve's guitar phrasing here. It goes, stop. Right, can we do that? Let's try it. And we did. And they were so receptive to ideas like that. So when I was working on Close to the Edge, my mind was always thinking about the next step. And Chris would come up with a great season which could call you from the depths of your disgrace and reach. I'd go against the halftime feel and dance up in the different higher rhythms, And that's how things were put together. Then we got to the chorus when I went up to his house in Hampstead, and he said, I've just written this thing, right, close to the edge, round by the corner. And I said, down at the end, round by the river. I read Sid Arthur, who finished up by the river, you see. And I had a really good rapport with Steve. I could say, another key. The seasons will pass you by. I get on. And you find the chord. I get down. That's how we worked, It was very spontaneous, but it took a long time. And then we got to the middle section. After we'd done a kind of song, the song was getting over, da, 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 very simple song. Da, 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 da. Then the chorus was close to the edge. So that kept repeating. After we'd done it 3 times, 4 times, or 3 times, I thought, now we've got to stop. But then we'll go into this sort of river of sound or ocean of sound. They all looked at me and said, John, what are you talking about? I said, well, it's like, because I've been listening to this composer, Wendy Carlos, but he was Walter Carlos in those days, and he had an album called Sonic Seasoning. which is very beautiful. This wash of energy, oceany, very, very beautiful electronic music, if you like. So I created this sound with, I think Bill was helping, hitting some milk bottles, making some sounds and stuff. That was the intro as well. And then the middle was this sort of dreamy, dreamy section. And we needed a song. Steve had these lovely chords, and I said, 2 million people barely satisfied, 200 women watch one woman cry too late. I get up, I get down. I get high on, and then I get down a bit, So that was the middle song. And then we were going to lead it up and build it up for Rick to bring in his solo and then get into the next tangent, which we played earlier. So you realized, oh gosh, how many minutes are we now? 15? We're doing it, Then Steve came a day later. We'd recorded that song, I Get Up and Get Down. And he said, I just remembered I actually wrote a song with those chords. And I said, well, sing it. And he sang it to me. I said, well, just sing it. And he did. His song went into mine like that. So it was a piece of magic. It just happened, And just got to that place where we got into Rick's solo, build it up. A lot of Chris work. Chris was really heavily into that, and Bill, of course. And, they went through a few arguments about where the beat is, where the tempo beat and where we're going. I said, listen, as far as I know, when you hit something, that's the beat. So the bass drum is the beat. And Chris said, no, it's not. It's when I play the bass. Okay, let's go and have a beer, But when we finished it, and the following day we listened to the mixing, when the mixing a week later, and you sit back and you go through this feeling that this is really different. And I'm glad you enjoyed it in your young days.
React when they first heard you tour with Close to the Edge?
Well, the funniest gig was the first one, because we rehearsed it and we just knew it in a way. And the first gig we did was with Elton John, Mahavishnu Orchestra, and yes, in Crystal Palace. There's a lake there and a stage, and people sat in the grass for maybe 5,000, 7,000 people. And we went on and started playing this new piece of music. It wasn't even released, I don't think. We playing Close to the Edge, and they were pretty warm about, Roundabout and Starship Troop or whatever we were doing. But then we did Close to the Edge, and I'm sure I heard crickets because you could see them start eating sandwiches. They're having a picnic, you see. It felt like it was too long. It really felt really too long. Anyway, we got through it, and that was it. It was like breathing very heavily towards the end. We're going to get through. We're we're finished. And you could hear a murmur of, okay, that was okay. And the crowd were bored, I think. Not so much like that, but it felt like that to us, to me anyway. And then we went on tour with it, and within a week, the audience were, because it started to buy the record, the audiences knew the record. And so when we started playing Close to the Edge, they'd stand up and go crazy and listen intently, and then sit down and listen. That was the idea, as a band, yes, I wouldn't say we're middle-aged, but we're in our 30s, we're all getting on, so I didn't think being rock stars was, but we knew we'd captured a lot of people with this kind of music, Fragile into Close to the Edge, and so you could hear a pin drop in a stadium full of like 20,000 people, Madison Square Gardens, and go, amazing. Because by then, I was very confident we were good. It took us 5-6 years to get to that point where I just went, after Fragile, I knew Fragile was happening, but close to the edge, I thought, we broke some barriers here, and it was a fantastic feeling. I can live with that forever. Thank you very much.
It's quite an achievement, and I mean, that went on and on. You kept producing epic length tracks after epic length tracks, and I've listened to them all. They're fantastic. I think Awaken is another favourite of mine.
Well, 3 o'clock this morning, I couldn't sleep because I've been working on all this music and I just couldn't relax. And I got up and went to YouTube, and it was Gilmour from Pink Floyd, the guitarist, and then Steve Hackett, and then me doing Awaken with the orchestra in Iceland. I've listened to it and it sounded really good. And it just felt really good. In all intents and purposes, yes, I actually got to that top of the mountain there with Awaken, and it did something very unique and very special.
The recording sessions were done in Montreux, and you had Rick Wakeman playing those tremendous organ parts and the build-up towards the anti-climax, I think. I'm just lost for words for them.
Well, it's a great story. We were doing the same thing, like with Awaken, like I did with every music. Yes, did. I would come up with ideas. Me and Steve write some parts. Me and Chris write some ideas, and I pick up on what people were playing. And we did, Heart of the Sunrise, because Chris and Bill were for about an hour. And I said, why don't you change key? Yes, so you get into that motivation. But I remembered that we were staying at a Holiday Inn in America, and I walked past Steve's bedroom and I heard him playing this riff. Down, 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 down. And I thought, okay, the smoke coming from under the door. So I went and I breakfast and I came back, he's still playing it. So I opened the door, I said, Steve, can you change the key and modulate? Down, 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 down. That's good. And I started singing over it, and we recorded that. And so I said to him, how many chords can you actually play? Because Steve just knew so many chords, unbelievable. How many chords can you play without repeating yourself? And he went, okay, do it again. So I recorded it. Workings of man sets the flower, the historical life. We were getting the flower of the fruit of his tree. Mumbling that idea. So that was the first two movements we had going. And then thought about the middle organ. In the studio in Montreux, I have my harp, which I have here. And I played the harp because they're rehearsing. What am I going to do? I'll play some harp and I'll do some painting. I actually painted all the lyrics for Awaken. So it gives them opportunity to get on with rehearsing their part, the sections, And then I said, okay, now we've come to this section now. I'm going to play down, 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 down. Alan, have you got any crotals? Yeah, I've got some. Ding, 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 ding. And Steve did a sort of slide guitar sound, and it's beautiful. I said, this could go on for a while, and then Chris comes in after. It's beautiful. So we created this atmosphere, and then Rick started playing the organ, like a Hammond organ it was, and it just didn't sound, what he was playing was pretty good, but it didn't sound right, So we got through it, and I said, do you know, Rick, shall we find a church organ? So we found out there was a church organ in this church in Vevey, which is the next village along from Montreux. And that's where Charlie Chaplin lived. And his son used to come and watch the band. And his son said, what, you want to come and meet my dad? I said, oh, Charlie Chaplin? No, he's Charlie Chaplin. I wouldn't know what to say. So we went to the church, a beautiful church. We set up some microphones and my harp, and I was in the pews, and I set up the microphone for the harp and microphones for the church organ, and we started rehearsing. And we spent 2 days recording it, and then we edited down exactly the best parts that Rick had played, and then we recorded it. And in Switzerland, it's interesting, we could actually plug in the mixer. We had a little mixer, my harp and the mics and the organ in a mixer, and you could plug it into the telephone wires, because telephone wires in Switzerland are perfect. There's no noise. So we could actually send that signal to the studio in Montreux, 10 miles away, into the studio.
Oh, wow.
So we could actually hear the guys in the studio, and they actually played along with us as we did recordings. I think we just did 3 recordings, maybe 4, and out of them we just edited it down. And then on the way back from the church, Rick said, I'm gonna write a choir part. And I thought, this is heaven. This is like being in musical heaven, you know.
I mean, Awaken is like a musical heaven. I love the mellotron part at the end, and your vocal, you know, at the end, the high vibration, you know, that vocal is so ethereal. A truly ethereal piece of music there, and one that always leaves me stunned. From 1977's Going for the One was Yes, playing Awaken. So coming back to your brand new album, The Thousand Hands, does this first chapter signify new chapters of music?
I suppose so, because we got through finishing the tracks that we thought worked, and we finished it with 4 extra tracks we never used. And Michael said we could always do chapter 2. And I said, yeah, we'll see. And thinking the album was going to come out last year, we'd be doing it. And when it didn't happen, I think after I'd done the last tour with the 1000 Hands band, I spent a couple of months at home. I wrote 4 songs. So we have about 8 songs that we can use. And probably now we've got free time for the next 6 months to write some more. And I write all the time. I'm always writing music. In fact, I just sent a piece of music to the producer's brother, Tim, saying, could you put a bass and groove on this track? And you never know, it might work.
I actually heard that Steve Howe in a recent interview said that in a couple of weeks' time, they're going to announce some kind of project. And I was wondering if there is any chance that at some point in the future you may work with Steve and the band.
Well, I always say at the end of my emails to Steve, send me some music, I'm happy to sing with you. And that's the way I am. I'm very open. It's a question of timing for everybody, and we'll see what happens. I had a dream the other week about, I was actually with my guitar getting ready to go on stage, and everybody in the band, the Yes Band was there, and Rick was there, Trevor, and some musicians there. And I was going on to sing a couple of songs with just my guitar. and say hello, and then the bands would come on, do their thing, and then we all got together at the end of the show and did the Close to the Edge and Awaken.
Well, let's hope that
You never know.
Yeah, you never know. But it's been so great talking to you, Jon Anderson. Thank you so much for coming on Take Two.
Cheers, John. I wish you well.
And what a wonderful interview that was. One that I've been waiting to do since I first started listening to Yes Music. So I'd like to thank Jon for taking the time out and chatting with me. And if you want to keep up to date with Jon's musical projects, be sure to give him a follow on social media. And I hope you can join me again at the same time next week, as I'm joined by the renowned blues guitarist Snowy White, who played with bands including Thin Lizzy and Pink Floyd. Until then, a Yes classic to take out the show now. From Fragile, it's Roundabout.